Housing. If our area is to continue to remain a vital part of the region, we need planned growth and development, more housing options, and greater access to funding. As we age, our housing needs change, not our desire to live in our community. Currently, we have few housing options available to our local population, and that needs to change. How will you support the development of local housing strategy for our area?
Thanks very much for the question. This is a particularly interesting question along the Eastern Shore because this is one area where I see unique needs within our riding. I mentioned at the outset that when I talk to people, I've been discerning common issues. But across our riding and indeed within our province, when you see the housing needs, it's typically low-income families, First Nations housing, and seniors. Those are all issues here as well. But along the Eastern Shore, there's an added element, and it has to do with your proximity to Halifax, which I know causes a lot of feathers to be ruffled along here when you're paying HRM taxes and not getting the services you need here. As the city grows, and it is one of the few areas within our region that is growing, the need for housing in commutable communities increases. We do need to focus on the first group of initiatives that I mentioned, the low-income First Nations and seniors housings, through the federal investment in infrastructure. But what we also need to do is start cooperating with municipalities. We need a strong representative that says, don't forget the Eastern Shore. You are part of HRM too. If you look just up the road as we get outside of our riding, ironically, you start to see housing development plans that are planning growth for 350 units, not 20 minutes from here. But you look at Musquodoboit Harbour and even down towards Ship Harbour and Sheet Harbour, there's very little attention paid to the housing needs of the different communities along the Eastern Shore. What we need is, again, it's about conversations. It's about having a strong local representative that can get in the municipality's ear and say, we do have needs for housing here as well, and we need to cooperate and use the federal funds that are available through the investment in infrastructure to say we can chip in and we can help make sure you have what you need to meet your housing needs, which are unique to this area along the Eastern Shore. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you. There's a number of issues here related to this that I'll touch on. Again, going back to water and sewer, if you want to grow, if you want to expand, you need to have that sort of infrastructure in place so you'll be able to do it. What else we need here, again, as others have said, we need to work closely with our municipal colleagues and our provincial colleagues. And I'm committed to doing that, to work on getting these projects going. We have federally, we have the Investment in Affordable Housing Fund, which is a $2 billion fund. That includes initiatives in new construction, renovation, shelter, accommodations, and we need to be working with our local representatives on the municipal side to get these projects working and moving. That's what we'll be committed to doing after the election. Thank you.
More crumbs. For the NDP, whether you rent or own a home should be a right, not a privilege. In 2013, the NDP introduced Bill C-300, which called for a strategy to ensure that the citizens were guaranteed adequate, affordable, and accessible housing. The Liberals and the Conservatives refused to support that bill. I know that housing is a major issue here along the Eastern Shore. There are a huge surplus of abandoned buildings. You just drive everywhere, you see them everywhere. In many areas, such as Mosher River, for example, there hasn't been any new construction for a couple of decades around there. How did we get there? We got here because the Liberals gutted the transfer payments when they were in power to balance the budget. In 1996, they unilaterally began offloading responsibility of social housing to the other provinces. onto the provinces, I should say, providing less and less funding. Do you realize that in 2031, only $81 million will be into that, and by 2040, $0 will be transferred? The Liberals and Conservatives have both abandoned the social housing responsibility. An NDP government will re-establish the federal government's commitment to housing. Specifically, we will pass the Affordable Housing Act, and to make it a right for every Canadian to have a safe, healthy place to live. Restore long-term, stable federal funding in social housing. Provide incentives to build 10,000 affordable units, rental units. We will also work with Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation on an income tax incentive that would allow people investing in rental income properties to reinvest that money and avoid the capital gains tax if we reinvest it into housing projects. Justin Trudeau's Liberals have promised a renewed federal role in housing, but given the Liberal record, given their record of gutting education, healthcare, and social transfers, that's their historical record. And remember the pictures you saw on TV just recently with Mr. Trudeau, standing there with Mr. Chrétien and Mr. Martin, and that he stood with them. And are we going back to their records? Are they saying one thing and we'll go backwards? And I believe that's what they'll do.
Canada is the only OECD country without a national housing strategy. I think you might be starting to see a trend here with the lack of vision at the top. As previously mentioned, the Green Party believes that infrastructure investments that are required in housing, we've got $500 million a year in one of our 6 municipal super funds dedicated to community housing options. We'd like to implement a national housing strategy through the Council of Canadian Governments, as we talked about, the Council of Canadian Governments being a partnership between federal, provincial, municipal, and First Nations. The National Housing Strategy would focus on housing options for seniors, First Nations, social housing, affordable market housing, making sure a percentage of all new units are affordable, and a housing first approach, which is to dedicate funding for the chronically homeless, to put these people in homes. It might seem counterintuitive, but the evidence shows that it's cheaper to put people in homes and give them housing than it is to deal with the homelessness problem. And that's the sort of evidence-based decision-making that the Green Party is looking at. These are solutions that have worked in other parts of the world. The Green Party is a global organization that is aware and is governed in Europe, has governed around the world, has formed coalition governments in Germany, and has people in governments around the world. We're looking at these solutions and we're bringing them to Canada instead of trying to operate in a vacuum. Another low-hanging fruit and an element of the housing strategy is energy efficiency. 40% of our energy is wasted through leaky buildings. Our green economy will create jobs plugging these holes, bring down housing costs for everyone, and create jobs locally by harvesting this low-hanging fruit. Thank you.
Transit. Public transit is a priority for ordinary Canadians across the country. For rural communities, it is of particular interest. Without access to transportation, many of our residents struggle to go shopping, keep appointments, or participate in the life of the community. What is your party's plan for expanding public and affordable transit into rural areas? Right?
So for public transit, our government brought in a program that would be $1 billion a year that would be going out to help create public transit. And we also put in it used to be a gas tax that was temporary, would come and go. We made it permanent, $2 billion a year, in which $277 million will go to Nova Scotia municipalities So our goal in that would be, again, to work with the municipalities to make sure that it's being used appropriately and used around everywhere, not just in the cities. So we would have to work with our counterparts again on that to make sure the money is distributed properly. And again, what we need here is a strong representative who can do that, who knows how the system works, who can work with municipal and provincial officials and get the job done. And I can guarantee you I will be able to do that. Thank you.
And Ross?
I don't mean to be too smart or disrespectful, but 10 years should be long enough to get it done. I know that transportation along the Eastern Shore is a major problem. There's no public transport. There's no trains. There's no buses. There's not even a taxi service. Apart from everything else, Highway 7 needs a complete overhaul. I'm not going to tell you that the NDP has a silver bullet. I'm not going to promise you that here today. But our policies are a step in the right direction. First and foremost, the NDP is committed to preparing a comprehensive transit plan for the communities across this country, including here. The President of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has said that this plan will be a significant step forward for communities across the country in addressing the transit needs. I was a proud member in Pictou County of the Transit Committee, and I worked on it for 5 years, and I decided to run in politics because we were getting nowhere. Ultimately, improving transportation and public transit along the Eastern Shore is going to be a matter of better federal and provincial and municipal relationships. We need complete cooperation. One statistic sums up the Conservative record in this regard. Stephen Harper has met exactly twice, 2006, 2009. Mr. Mulcair has promised to meet twice a year, once in Ottawa and once somewhere else in Canada. Maybe we can meet down here. That kind of collaboration and working together is the way to tackle and address the concerns that the locals have here in the Eastern Shore. This collaborative approach is central to the NDP's infrastructure plan, which will deliver $1.5 billion annual investment by the end of our first mandate. As a former MLA and Minister in the Cabinet, I know how important it is to have that strong relationship with Ottawa and with the municipalities. Your voice needs to be heard. We need to understand the collective need of the community and work for that. I mentioned earlier about cycling. I just throw that out there as dropping a seed and saying how beautiful an area this is and how we could have bed and breakfasts all along the shore and go from here to Cape Breton along that road. It's so beautiful. Just imagine if we all sat down together and talked and communicated, showed our interest and worked together, what we could achieve. It's time for change. 10 years is long enough. The previous 10 years of the previous government was long enough. How long did we wait?
David, you're next.
Thank you. The single car model, the one person, one car model, is the product of a broken system. It's not working for people, it's not working for pocketbooks, and it's not working for the environment. Now, the reason that I say it's a product of a broken system is because carbon is not priced into our economic model. I'm an economist by education and profession, and the free market is a wonderful thing because it efficiently allocates resources, but it only efficiently allocates resources if things are priced right. So we can't talk about transit, we can't talk about public transit without talking about pricing carbon. I'll probably talk about it a little bit more in the environment section, which will come up next. But accurately reflecting the impacts of our transportation solutions will create new models of transportation that make sense in a system that's fixed. As I mentioned, the Green Party has these municipal super funds, $500 million a year to mass transit promotion, $500 million to cycling and pedestrian promotion, further money for infrastructure development overall, which we're badly in need of, especially up here. A couple of months ago, I was on my way to Mooseland. I was campaigning and was going to the Otter Ponds demonstration forest for an event, and I broke my oil pan on one of the lovely roads of rural Nova Scotia. So that was a significant expense. You know, the investments in our infrastructure are going to pay dividends for people, they're going to pay dividends for our economy and our small businesses and our large businesses. The money is out there. In 2011, the first 3 months of 2011, $9 billion was invested in RRSP funds. The Green Party proposes to allow RRSP deductible municipal, to create a municipal RRSP that is tax deductible. If even half of that $9 billion went into municipal RRSP investments that could be plowed into a municipal infrastructure that's so badly in need of renovation, that'd be $4.5 billion a year right there. And that's not government money, that's people funding their own infrastructure, which would pay a dividend to these people. It's a great investment in Canada and saves the federal government from having to blow the budget apart. And again, I can't emphasize enough, Ross is right, the federal government hasn't been working very well with the other levels of government. All this would have to happen within the framework of the Council of Canadian Governments, a partnership between federal, provincial, municipal, and First Nations to come up with the solutions, especially for rural Atlantic Canada, that rural Atlantic Canada needs. Thank you.
Now, Sean.
So the issue of transit is one that I really enjoy talking about, because this has been an issue that I actually learned a lot about during the course of this campaign. For starters, I keep coming back to the fact that we're in HRM, but we don't receive the same services that they get in the city. We don't have city buses, but we're still expected to contribute to the city's tax base, and it seems unfair. When I've been chatting with people, not just in this area, but in Antigonish and Pictou County, there's actually some interesting initiatives going on right now with community transit models. They're essentially small bus or car services that help people in the community get where they need to go. Lack of access to affordable public transit has a disproportionate effect on seniors, people in rural areas, people living in poverty, and disabled persons. I was looking over at the farmers market today, a brochure of the Musco Rider. This is the kind of program that we should be looking at to provide a unique alternative that will service rural areas. It may not be realistic to expect the HRM bus services to run with the same frequency that they do down Robie Street in Halifax. But if we're contributing to the tax base of the municipality, we should be entitled to the same quality of services. It's only fair. Now, if we go beyond the public transit model, another major issue throughout rural Nova Scotia, along the Eastern Shore and through Musquodoboit, is the quality of our secondary highways. Today, I took the Lake Egmont Road to get here. That road is a disaster. It's unbelievable, but it's not just Lake Egmont Road, it's all over the place. When I came out here for the first time a few months back as part of the campaign, I spoke to a guy named Melvin in Middle Musquodoboit, or actually Cooks Brook, and I said, Melvin, what's wrong with your community? And he said, Sean, I'm taking you to the Lake Egmont Road. And he pulled up, and no joke, he said, this thing washes to 12 feet wide in the winter. You can see exposed cables showing through, and this is a major throughway from Musquodoboit to the Eastern Shore. It's unacceptable that main thoroughfares are going to deteriorate through the winter, and it's supposed to deal with sometimes industrial two-way traffic, and we have 12 feet for them to get through. These are very practical problems that impact people's day-to-day lives. And with an investment in projects like this in our communities, not only are we going to improve the quality of life of the people who live here, but we're going to create economic opportunities for the people who need to build those roads and other infrastructure projects. So thanks very much. I really appreciate it.